Power doesn't die when the legs give out. It just rots the mind instead. Diamond Kelly ruled the city's underground until a sniper's bullet severed his spine, leaving him a prisoner in a multi-million-dollar fortress. He broke every caretaker, shattered every nurse, drowning in a toxic sea of his own bitterness. Then came Caprice, a maid too crushed by the weight of her own life to fear his temper. He wanted to break her too. Instead, she fell asleep. And for the first time in 2 years, the devil smiled. The worst part of the paralysis wasn't the lack of feeling. It was the phantom sensations. The ghost of a cold floor against heels that couldn't move. The memory of an itch on a calf that was essentially dead meat. Diamond sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, staring out at the sprawling, rain-slicked grounds of the estate. The bulletproof glass muted the thunder, turning the violent storm outside into a silent film. He gripped the armrests of his custom-built wheelchair. The leather creaked under the strain of his white-knuckled grip. His upper body had grown thicker, more brutal in the 2 years since the ambush. But from the waist down, he was nothing. A statue. A monument to his own failure to see the threat coming. The heavy mahogany doors opened behind him. Diamond didn't turn. He knew the footfalls. Heavy, measured. Levi. The physical therapist quit, Levi said, his voice flat. He walked over to the desk, dropping a clipboard onto the dark wood. That's the third one this month, Dom. You threw a glass paperweight at this one's head. He talked to me like a child, Diamond rasped, his voice sounding like gravel crushed under a tire. Telling me to push through the burn. There is no burn, Levi. There is nothing, Levi sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He was Diamond's second in command, the man who kept the streets bleeding in the right directions, while Diamond barked orders from a cage of high-end medical equipment. You need the therapy to keep the muscles from atrophying completely, and we need staff. The head housekeeper is threatening to walk. She says the new girls are terrified of you. Good. Diamond finally spun the chair around, the electric motor whining softly in the cavernous room. His dark eyes were hollow, rimmed with the exhaustion of chronic nerve pain that the doctors insisted was psychosomatic. Let them be terrified. This isn't a hotel, it's a compound. It's a tomb, Dom, Levi corrected quietly. And you're burying yourself alive in it. Levi left without another word, the click of the door echoing off the high ceilings. Diamond was alone again. He preferred it. People looked at him with either pity or fear, and he despised both. Downstairs, in the sterile, fluorescent-lit industrial kitchen of the estate, Caprice Thompson was tying a cheap canvas apron around her waist. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. She had worked a 9-hour shift at a diner across town before taking the 2 buses required to reach the gated community where the Kelly estate loomed like a modern-day fortress. She was 26, but her eyes held the dull, flat gaze of someone decades older. Medical bills, a mother in a memory care facility, debt collectors who called at 3 a.m. Caprice didn't care that the man who owned this house was a criminal. She didn't care about the armed men patrolling the perimeter in the pouring rain. She only cared about the $30 an hour they were paying for night shift cleaning. Don't look him in the eye, Mrs. Higgins, the head housekeeper, warned as she handed Caprice a bucket of cleaning supplies. Don't speak unless spoken to. If he starts yelling, just leave the room. Mrs. Higgins paused, searching for a polite word. "He is very unwell." Caprice took the heavy bucket. The handle bit into her calloused palm. "Where do you want me to start?" Mrs. Higgins blinked, taken aback by the lack of reaction. "The East Wing, his quarters. The nurses usually clean it, but, well, we don't have a nurse tonight. Just dust, mop, and change the linens in the spare room. Do not touch his medical equipment." Caprice nodded, turning away before the older woman could say anything else. She lugged the supplies up the sweeping marble staircase. Her knees popped. Her lower back throbbed with a dull ache. She was so tired she felt nauseous. She pushed open the double doors to the East Wing. The air up here was different, heavy, stifling. It smelled of expensive cologne, sterile alcohol wipes, and stale air. She moved methodically, letting the physical labor numb her brain. Spray, wipe, polish, wring the mop, repeat. She was wiping down the baseboards in the long hallway when she heard the mechanical hum. She paused, the damp rag in her hand. Diamond wheeled out of his study, stopping abruptly when he saw her. He was a terrifying figure. Broad shoulders, a sharp, unshaven jaw, and eyes that looked like they could strip the paint off the walls. He wore a dark tailored shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal thick forearms mapped with ink and scars. He stared down at her where she knelt on the floor. "Who the hell are you?" he snapped, his voice sharp enough to draw blood. Caprice didn't flinch. She just looked up at him, her expression completely blank. She slowly pushed a strand of dull brown hair out of her eyes with the back of a damp wrist. "Caprice," she said, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Night cleaning." She looked back down at the baseboard and resumed wiping. Diamond sat frozen in his chair. It wasn't just that she hadn't cowered. It was the way she looked at him. There was no pity. There was no fear. It was worse. It was absolute, crushing indifference. She had looked at him the way one looks at a piece of furniture that needs dusting. "I didn't tell you to keep working," he barked, rolling the chair closer. Caprice stopped again. She rocked back on her heels, letting out a slow, shallow breath. She looked up at him once more. Her eyes were sunken, ringed with heavy purple shadows. Her skin was sallow, devoid of any light. "Do you want me to stop working?" she asked, her tone entirely devoid of sarcasm. It was a genuine, exhausted question. "Because if I stop, I don't get paid. And if I don't get paid, I can't be here." Diamond's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to fire her on the spot, to yell, to demand she leave his sight. But the words died in his throat. The sheer weight of her fatigue seemed to suck the oxygen out of the air between them. "Finish the hallway," he muttered, spinning the chair around and retreating into his bedroom. Caprice watched him go. She didn't feel a rush of victory. She just felt a desperate need to sit down. But she turned back to the baseboard, sprayed it with chemical cleaner, and kept scrubbing. Weeks bled into one another. The estate operated on a grim schedule, a clockwork of miserable routines. Diamond fired 2 more nurses and threw a plate of food at a chef. The tension in the house was a physical thing, thick and suffocating. The staff walked on eggshells, communicating in whispers, terrified of triggering the boss's legendary wrath. Except for Caprice, she became a fixture in the night, a silent ghost moving through the cavernous rooms with her rags and mops. She didn't try to engage him. She didn't offer him bright, false smiles like the agency nurses did. She existed in a state of perpetual, grinding survival. Diamond found himself watching her. It started as suspicion. In his world, no one was that detached. Everyone wanted something. But Caprice never lingered near his safe, never glanced at the confidential papers on his desk. She just cleaned. One Tuesday at 2 a.m., the nerve pain in his legs flared up. It was a cruel trick of the brain, firing distress signals from limbs that couldn't even feel a pinprick. Diamond sat in the dark in his massive living room, his hands gripping his thighs, his breath coming in ragged, hissing gasps. The pain medication sat in a bottle on the kitchen counter downstairs. He refused to call the night guard to get it. He refused to be weak. A light flicked on in the hallway. Caprice walked in, carrying a basket of folded laundry. She stopped when she saw him hunched over in the chair. Diamond glared at her through the gloom, his face slick with cold sweat. "Get out," he gritted out. Caprice didn't move. She looked at his white-knuckled grip on his legs. She looked at his pale face. She set the laundry basket down on a leather ottoman. "Where are the pills?" she asked. "I said, get out. Are they in the kitchen or your bathroom?" Her voice was flat, unyielding. "Kitchen," he snarled, hating the way the word sounded like a defeat. "Counter, left of the sink." She disappeared. Diamond squeezed his eyes shut, preparing to tear into her when she returned, to remind her of her place, to make sure she knew she was nothing but a maid. But when she came back, she didn't hand him the bottle. She held a single white pill and a glass of lukewarm water. She held them out. He stared at the pill. "I take 2. "The bottle says 1 every 6 hours, Caprice replied. "You look like you haven't eaten. 2 will tear up your stomach lining. Take the 1. He looked at her hand. It was raw, the knuckles red and chapped from harsh cleaning chemicals. Her fingernails were clipped short, bare, and unpolished. It was the hand of someone who worked until their bones ached. He snatched the pill, tossed it back, and drank the water. He shoved the glass back at her. "Happy? It's not about me being happy," she said, turning away. She picked up the laundry basket. "It's about you not screaming in the middle of the night so I can get my work done." She walked away, leaving him in the dark. Diamond stared at the empty doorway. A strange, unfamiliar sensation tightened in his chest. It wasn't anger, it was shock. No one spoke to him like that. Levi gave him hard truths, but always with the respect of a subordinate. The men on the street spoke to him with terror. Women, before the accident, spoke to him with calculated allure. Caprice spoke to him like he was an inconvenience. And strangely, it was the most grounding thing he had experienced in 2 years. It made him feel normal. It made him feel like a man who was just being annoying, rather than a crippled monster to be placated. He began to leave things out, just to see what she would do. A dropped book, a spilled glass of water. Caprice never complained. She picked up the book. She mopped up the water. She never sighed, never rolled her eyes. She just did the work. But the toll was visible. The dark circles under her eyes bruised deeper into her skin. She lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. Her movements became slower, heavier. One evening, Levi sat across from Diamond in the study, reviewing ledgers from the shipping ports. Diamond wasn't listening. He was watching the reflection in the glass door. Caprice was in the hall, vacuuming the thick carpets. "The Russian shipment clears customs tomorrow," Levi was saying. "We need to make sure..." Levi stopped, following Diamond's gaze. He frowned. The maid? Really, Dom? She looks like a stiff breeze would knock her over. She works 2 other jobs, Diamond said quietly. He hadn't asked her. He had ordered one of his men to run a background check on her. Caprice Thompson, deep in debt. Mother in full-time care. No criminal record. No mob ties. Just a woman drowning in a broken system. Levi raised an eyebrow. Since when do you care about the staff's schedule? I don't, Diamond snapped, tearing his eyes away from the glass. Focus on the port, Levi. But later that night, when Caprice came into his study to empty the wastebaskets, he noticed the slight tremor in her hands. She was moving mechanically, like a wind-up toy running out of gear. Sit down, Diamond commanded. Caprice stopped, her hand lingering on the brass rim of the trash can. She looked at him, confused. I haven't finished the floor. The floor is fine. Sit down. He pointed to the heavy leather sofa across from his desk. I'm on the clock, Mr. Kelly. If Mrs. Higgins catches me sitting, I own the house. I pay Mrs. Higgins. Sit. Reluctantly, slowly, Caprice walked over to the sofa and perched on the very edge of the cushion. She kept her spine rigid, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked entirely out of place, a bruised sparrow in a cage built for hawks. You're shaking, Diamond observed. I'm fine, just drank too much coffee. You're lying. Caprice finally met his eyes. For a fraction of a second, the numb veil lifted, revealing a flash of deep, desperate anger. Does it matter? Does it change whether this trash gets emptied? No, so let me do my job. Diamond leaned forward in his chair. Why do you push yourself like this? The debt? Your mother? Caprice froze. The color drained completely from her already pale face. You looked into me. I look into everyone who has access to my home. She stood up abruptly, her breathing hitched. I need this job. I don't steal. I don't pry. Please don't fire me because I'm tired. I can do the work. It was the first time she had shown fear. It wasn't fear of him, of his mob ties or his temper. It was the raw, primal fear of poverty, the terror of the bottom falling out. Diamond felt a sudden, sharp ache in his chest that had nothing to do with damaged nerves. I'm not firing you, he said softly. The gentleness in his own voice startled him. Empty the trash, Caprice, then go home. My shift isn't over for another hour. I'll pay you for the hour. Go home. She stared at him, searching his harsh, shadowed face for the trap. Finding none, she quickly grabbed the trash bag, her movements jerky and panicked, and practically fled the room. Diamond watched the empty doorway for a long time. He gripped the wheels of his chair, the rubber cold against his palms. He realized, with a sickening drop in his gut, that he hadn't thought about his paralyzed legs for the last 20 minutes. He had only thought about her. November brought a bitter chill to the city, rattling the windows of the estate and seeping into the stone floors. The cold was Diamond's enemy. It settled into his immobile joints, causing a deep, throbbing ache that radiated up his spine. By midnight on a Thursday, he was exhausted, irritable, and in relentless pain. He was in the study, going over security footage from one of their front businesses. The blue light from the monitors cast sharp, skeletal shadows across his face. He rubbed his temples, a headache blooming behind his eyes. The door opened softly. Caprice slipped in, carrying a tray with a fresh pot of coffee and a glass of water. She didn't announce herself. She never did. She moved to the side table, setting the tray down without letting the porcelain clink. She looked worse tonight. The shadows under her eyes were practically bruised, her skin translucent. She moved with a heavy, dragging limp, favoring her left leg. "What happened to your knee?" Diamond asked, his eyes fixed on the monitors, though his attention was entirely on her. "Slipped on the ice outside the diner," Caprice murmured, pouring the coffee. "It's fine. You shouldn't be walking on it. I have to walk to clean." She brought the mug to his desk, setting it down precisely on a coaster. She turned to leave, but she stumbled. Her bad knee buckled. She caught herself on the edge of the heavy oak desk, her breath catching in a sharp gasp. Diamond's arm shot out instinctively, his hand wrapping around her wrist to steady her. His grip was iron tight. He felt the delicate bird bones of her wrist, the racing pulse beneath the cold skin. Caprice froze. She didn't pull away, but she didn't look at him either. She just stared at his hand on her wrist. "Sit," Diamond ordered, his voice low. "Mr. Kelly." "I said sit, Caprice." He let go of her wrist and pointed to the small plush sofa near the fireplace, intended for guests he never entertained. She hobbled over to it and sank into the cushions. She let out a long, shuddering exhale, her eyes closing for a brief second before fluttering open. "I'll just rest it for a minute, then I'll finish the library." Diamond maneuvered his chair around the desk. He rolled over to the fireplace, flicking the electronic switch that ignited the gas flames. The fire flared to life, casting a warm golden glow over the freezing room. He turned his chair to face her. Caprice was staring blankly at the flames. The warmth seemed to seep into her, melting the rigid tension that held her together. Her shoulders slumped. Her head rested back against the leather. "Tell me about the debt," Diamond said. Caprice kept her eyes on the fire. "Medical bills. My mom had a stroke. No insurance. Then the memory issue started. The facility costs $5,000 a month. The rest is just survival, rent, food, interest rates." She spoke mechanically, reciting a list of facts she had long ago accepted as her executioner. Diamond watched the firelight dance across her tired face. In his world, a debt of $30,000 or $40,000 was a rounding error. It was the price of a watch. For this woman, it was a mountain crushing her lungs. "I could wipe it out," Diamond said quietly. "One phone call. Your mother's facility is paid for the next 10 years. Your debt is gone." Caprice finally looked at him. There was no hope in her eyes, only a weary, guarded suspicion. "Nothing is free, Mr. Kelly. I don't have anything you want." Diamond held her gaze. He thought of the women from his past. Women wrapped in silk and dripping with diamonds. Women who smiled with sharp teeth and calculated their affection by his bank balance. He looked at Caprice in her cheap canvas apron, her hands ruined by bleach, her face hollowed out by sacrifice. "You underestimate your worth, Caprice." She shook her head slowly. "I'm just tired. I don't want to play games." "It's not a game." "Then what is it? Pity?" She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "I don't want your pity. I just want to do my job." She placed her hands on her thighs, preparing to push herself up. But the warmth of the fire, the quiet of the room, and the relentless, crushing fatigue of her week finally won. As she leaned forward, a wave of pure exhaustion washed over her face. Her eyes drifted shut. She murmured something incoherent, a soft protest against her own body shutting down. And then she fell back against the cushions. Within seconds, her breathing evened out. The deep, heavy rhythm of true, exhausted sleep. Diamond sat in his wheelchair, paralyzed, watching her. He didn't wake her. He didn't call security to have her removed. He just sat there in the quiet room, the fire crackling softly, the rain lashing against the glass outside. He rolled his chair a few inches closer. He studied the way her face softened in sleep. The harsh lines of worry smoothed out. She looked younger. She looked peaceful. For 2 years, Diamond had lived in a state of constant, seething rage. He hated his broken body. He hated the world that kept spinning while he was anchored to a chair. He had looked for reasons to be angry, reasons to punish the people around him because he was being punished by God or fate or whatever cruel entity let him survive that sniper's bullet. But looking at Caprice, sleeping on his couch because she simply had nothing left to give the world, the rage quieted. She hadn't tried to fix him. She hadn't offered him empty platitudes about how things would get better. She had just handed him a pill and told him to stop screaming so she could work. She treated him like a human being. A difficult, annoying human being, but a human nonetheless. Diamond reached out, his knuckles brushing lightly against the cheap canvas of her apron. He didn't touch her skin. He just let his hand rest near her. A strange, rusty sensation tugged at the corners of his mouth. It felt foreign, unnatural. His facial muscles hadn't moved this way in a long time. Diamond Kelly, the paralyzed king of a decaying empire, looked at the exhausted maid sleeping beside him, and he smiled. Caprice woke to the sound of rain lashing against glass. For a terrifying, disorienting second, she didn't know where she was. The air smelled of expensive leather and wood smoke, not the bleach and stale grease of her cramped apartment. She shot up from the cushions. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Gray morning light filtered through the massive bulletproof windows of the study. She looked down at her clothes. Her canvas apron was crumpled. Her hands were still bare and raw. Then she looked across the room. Diamond was sitting at his desk. He hadn't moved. The computer monitors were dark, and he was simply watching her, an untouched cup of cold coffee resting near his elbow. The fire had burned down to glowing embers in the grate. Panic, cold and sharp, sliced through Caprice's lingering exhaustion. She checked her cheap plastic wristwatch. It was 6:00 a.m. "I fell asleep," she breathed, the words scraping her dry throat. She stood up too fast. Her bad knee screamed in protest, but she ignored it, grabbing her cleaning rag from the coffee table. "Mr. Kelly, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to. I'll pack my things. You don't have to pay me for the shift." She braced herself for the shouting, for the cold, brutal dismissal that Mrs. Higgins had warned her about. Diamond just watched her frantic movements. His face was an unreadable mask of hard angles and shadowed stubble. "Sit down, Caprice. I need to go. I have the morning shift at the diner in an hour, and if I miss the bus..." "I called the diner." Caprice froze. The rag slipped from her fingers, dropping silently onto the plush rug. "You what?" "I had Levi call the manager at the diner," Diamond said, his voice flat, completely devoid of emotion. "You resigned, effective immediately." The blood drained from Caprice's face. A ringing started in her ears. The diner was her anchor. It barely paid minimum wage, but it paid in cash, and cash kept the lights on when the bank froze her accounts. Anger, hot, desperate, and blinding, flared in her chest. "You had no right," she whispered, her hands balling into fists. The numbness that usually shielded her was entirely gone, replaced by a raw, terrifying vulnerability. "You sit in this fortress and you think you can just play with people's lives? I needed that job. I need to feed myself. I need to pay for my mother's care." "Your mother's care is paid for." Caprice stopped. The ringing in her ears grew louder. "What?" Diamond reached into the breast pocket of his dark shirt. He pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope and tossed it onto the mahogany desk. It landed with a soft, heavy thud. "The memory care facility is paid in full for the next 5 years, Diamond stated, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. "The medical debt from the stroke has been cleared. The collection agencies have been informed that any further contact with you will be considered a personal insult to me. They won't call again." Caprice stared at the envelope. It looked like a trap. In her world, nothing came without strings. If a man like Diamond Kelly paid your debts, he owned you. Body, soul, and future. "Why?" Her voice shook. She didn't move closer to the desk. "I don't have anything to give you. I won't do illegal work. I won't run drugs. I won't hide guns. And I won't sleep with you." Diamond let out a harsh, barking laugh. It held no humor, only a bitter edge that cut through the quiet room. He gestured sharply to his paralyzed legs. "I am a cripple, Caprice. I'm not looking for a bedmate. And I have hundreds of men who handle my business. I don't need a tired maid to run guns." "Then why?" she demanded, stepping forward. "Why would you do this?" Diamond looked at her. He saw the fierce, cornered animal panic in her eyes. He couldn't tell her the truth. He couldn't tell her that watching her sleep was the first time in 2 years he had felt an ounce of peace. He couldn't admit that her grinding, miserable existence mirrored the cage of his own broken body. And fixing her life was the only thing he actually had the power to do. That kind of vulnerability was a death sentence in his world. "So," he lied. He leaned back in his wheelchair, adopting the cold, ruthless persona that kept the city's underground terrified of him. "Because your exhaustion is a liability," Diamond said coldly. "You limp around my house. You drop things. You fall asleep on my furniture. It annoys me. I need my environment controlled and quiet. You are loud with your misery." Caprice flinched. The words stung, precisely because they sounded exactly like something a callous mob boss would say. "I'm keeping you on staff," Diamond continued, his eyes locked onto hers. "But you're moving to the day shift. You will work exclusively in this wing. You will clean, you will bring my meals, and you will manage the schedules of the medical staff I constantly fire. I will pay you triple what the diner and the agency combined were paying you." Caprice looked from his hard, unforgiving face to the envelope on the desk. 5 years. Her mother was safe for 5 years. No more final notices. No more midnight panic attacks, wondering if she would be evicted. The heavy, crushing weight she had carried on her shoulders for 3 years suddenly evaporated. It left her feeling lightheaded. She walked slowly to the desk and picked up the envelope. Her hands trembled so violently she could barely open the flap. Inside were bank receipts, heavily stamped with the word "paid." Tears, hot and fast, spilled over her lower lashes. She didn't sob. She just stood there, staring at the papers, weeping in total silence. Diamond's jaw tightened. He looked away, staring out the window at the rain. He hated the tears. They made him feel a dangerous, unfamiliar urge to comfort her. "Wipe your face, Caprice," he muttered gruffly. "Shift starts at 8. The dynamic of the estate changed overnight." Caprice was no longer a ghost haunting the night shift. She was a permanent fixture in the East Wing. She traded the cheap canvas apron for neat, dark trousers and simple blouses. With the crushing debt gone and actual sleep returning to her routine, the sallow grayness faded from her skin. But proximity to Diamond Kelly meant proximity to his world. She saw the men in dark suits who arrived at all hours, their coats bulging suspiciously at the ribs. She heard the muted, violent arguments behind closed study doors. She learned quickly how to pour coffee and disappear when words like shipment, territory, and retaliation were thrown around. Levi Ward watched her with barely concealed suspicion. One afternoon, while Diamond was on a secure phone call, Levi cornered Caprice in the industrial kitchen. She was assembling a lunch tray: grilled chicken, black coffee, no sugar. "He doesn't do charity," Levi said, leaning against the stainless steel counter. He crossed his thick arms, his dark eyes tracking her movements. "Dom doesn't wipe out 50 grand in debt because someone looks tired." Caprice didn't look up from the tray. She had learned not to cower from the men in this house. "You should ask him why he did it then." "I just work here, Mr. Ward." "I did ask him," Levi replied flatly. "He told me to mind my business, which makes it exactly my business. You're a distraction. He's making careless decisions. He let a rival crew take 2 blocks in the South End last week because he was too busy yelling at an architect about redesigning the East Wing ramps." Caprice paused, a fork hovering over the plate. Ramps. She had noticed Diamond struggling with the lip of the doorway in the library a few days ago. She hadn't said anything. She just quietly wedged a heavy book against it to create a makeshift slope. He had noticed. "I clean his rooms and bring his food," Caprice said, picking up the tray. "I don't run his territory. If he's losing blocks, that's your failure, not mine." Levi stepped into her path. The air chilled. "Watch your mouth. You think because he bought your debt, you're untouchable? You're a pet, Caprice. A stray he felt sorry for. The second you become a liability, I'll remove you myself." Caprice looked him dead in the eye. "I've been a liability to everyone I've ever met, Levi. Take a number." She sidestepped him and walked out of the kitchen. Her heart was racing, but her spine remained perfectly straight. The real shift in their dynamic didn't happen during the day. It happened during the violent, unpredictable flares of Diamond's nerve pain. It was a Tuesday evening. A heavy snowstorm had blanketed the city, dropping the temperature into the single digits. Caprice was in the private library, categorizing a stack of ledgers, when she heard the crash. She dropped the books and ran to the study. Diamond was on the floor. His wheelchair was tipped on its side, the wheels spinning lazily in the air. He had dragged himself halfway to the desk, his massive arms shaking with the effort, his face contorted in a snarl of pure agony. His legs dragged behind him, dead, useless weight. Caprice rushed forward. "Don't touch me," Diamond roared, his voice feral. He swiped an arm out, knocking a heavy bronze lamp off a side table. It shattered against the wall. He was drowning in a phantom fire. The severed nerves in his spine were sending chaotic, agonizing signals to his brain, convincing him his legs were being crushed in a vice. Caprice ignored him. She didn't run for the guards. She didn't call the on-staff medic who usually sedated him. She dropped to her knees beside him. "Get away from me!" He grabbed her wrist, his grip bruising, trying to shove her back. "No!" Caprice used her free hand to grab his shoulder. "Breathe. You're not on fire. You're in your study. It's snowing outside. Look at me." Diamond's chest heaved. Sweat soaked his shirt. "It burns," he choked out, the admission tearing through his pride like a serrated blade. "It's tearing me apart." "It's fake," Caprice said, her voice firm, anchored. "Your brain is lying to you. Look at your legs, Diamond." It was the first time she had used his first name. He squeezed his eyes shut, his jaw locked in a grimace. Caprice shifted closer. She didn't offer empty comforts. She simply offered a physical anchor in the room. She pressed both her hands flat against his heaving chest, right over his racing heart. "Feel my hands," she commanded. "Focus on the pressure. Count my breaths." She inhaled deeply, exaggerating the rise and fall of her chest. For a long, agonizing minute, Diamond fought her. He fought the pain, the humiliation of being on the floor, the absolute vulnerability of needing this former maid to hold him together. But the steady, unyielding pressure of her small hands against his chest was the only real thing in a sea of phantom agony. Slowly, his breathing hitched and began to match hers. The manic, panicked look in his dark eyes began to dull, replaced by profound, bone-deep exhaustion. He lay on the rug, staring up at the ceiling, his breathing ragged. Caprice stayed on her knees beside him. She didn't speak. She didn't try to help him back into his chair yet. She just sat with him in the wreckage, letting the silence settle over them. Diamond turned his head to look at her. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. She wasn't looking at him with pity. She was looking at him with an intense, quiet understanding. She knew what it was like to have your own body betray you. She knew what it was like to be trapped. "Why didn't you call the medic?" he asked, his voice barely a rasp. "Because he knocks you out," Caprice replied, simply. "And I know you hate losing control more than you hate the pain." Diamond stared at her. The walls he had spent 2 years building around his broken ego cracked straight down the middle. He reached out, his thick, scarred fingers brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The touch was painfully gentle, a stark contrast to the violence he commanded daily. "You're going to be the death of me, Caprice Thompson," he murmured. Caprice didn't pull away from his touch. "We all die, Diamond. Some of us just do it faster than others." The morning after the snowstorm, a heavy, unspoken truce settled over the East Wing. Diamond didn't mention the fact that a former maid had commanded him through a pain flare on the floor. Caprice didn't mention the way his hand had trembled when he touched her hair. They simply returned to the work, but the air between them had shifted. The jagged, hostile edges of Diamond's isolation began to dull. He stopped throwing files when he was frustrated. He started eating the food she brought, abandoning his diet of black coffee and spite. For Caprice, the estate stopped feeling like a terrifying fortress and became something resembling a sanctuary. The crushing fatigue that had defined her 20s was slowly replaced by a quiet, hyper-vigilant energy. She noticed things. When you spend 3 years cleaning up other people's messes while trying to remain entirely unobserved, you learn how to read a room, On a Thursday in late January, the study was thick with the smell of stale cigar smoke and damp wool. Diamond had convened a meeting with his capos. The tension was suffocating. A rival crew, led by a man named Gideon Costa, had been aggressively pushing into the warehouse district. Caprice moved silently around the periphery of the massive room, collecting empty tumblers and refilling coffee cups. The men ignored her. To them, she was furniture, a fixture in a dark apron who didn't possess eyes or ears. Costa is testing the fences, Levi argued, pacing the length of the Persian rug. He wore a dark suit, his tie loosened. He paid off the dock workers to delay our shipments. If we don't push back hard, he's gonna think the paralysis went to your head, Dom. He thinks you're weak. Diamond sat behind his desk. He looked dangerous today. The harsh winter light cast sharp shadows across his face. He drummed his fingers on the mahogany, the heavy gold ring on his right hand clinking softly against the wood. If we hit him now, it's a street war, Diamond countered, his voice low and gravelly. I don't want a war over delayed crates. I want to know who let him get to the dock workers in the first place. Sitting opposite the desk was a heavy-set man named Bernardi, one of Diamond's oldest lieutenants. He wiped his sweating forehead with a handkerchief. We checked the foreman, Dom. Nobody talked. Costa just got lucky. Caprice reached past Bernardi to clear a glass. As she did, she caught sight of the heavy-set man's hands. His cuticles were chewed raw, bleeding at the edges. His knee was bouncing with a manic, rhythmic twitch under the table. When Diamond looked at him, Bernardi met his gaze. But when Diamond looked away, Bernardi's eyes instantly darted to the heavy iron safe in the corner of the room. Over and over. Caprice picked up the glass and retreated to the kitchen. An hour later, the men filed out, their heavy boots echoing down the marble hallway. The study doors clicked shut. Diamond remained at his desk, rubbing his temples, the stress radiating off him in waves. Caprice walked back in, carrying a fresh pot of coffee and a plate of sliced apples. She set them down next to his elbow. "You're grinding your teeth," she noted. "Costa is a cockroach," Diamond muttered, not looking up from the spread of shipping manifests. "And I'm trying to figure out which of my men just let him in the front door." Caprice paused. She picked up a stray pen from the floor and placed it in the silver cup on his desk. "It's the sweaty one." Diamond's hand stopped moving. He slowly raised his head, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "What did you say?" "The man in the gray suit, Bernardi." Caprice wiped down a ring of condensation on the wood. "He's terrified of you, but he's more terrified of whatever is in that safe." Diamond leaned back in his wheelchair. The mechanical hum filled the quiet room. "Bernardi has been with my family for 20 years. He held my father's casket." "Why would you think he's compromised?" "Because men who are just nervous don't chew their fingers until they bleed," Caprice said flatly. "And they don't map out the room looking for exits. Every time you looked at Levi, Bernardi looked at your safe, then at the door, then at the windows. He's calculating a timeline." She shrugged, picking up her tray. "Or maybe he just really likes the architecture. I'll get your lunch." She turned to leave. "Caprice." She stopped, looking over her shoulder. Diamond was staring at her with an expression she had never seen before. It wasn't the cold appraisal of a boss, nor the vulnerable exhaustion of a man in pain. It was profound, genuine respect. "Have Levi pull the security footage from the docks," Diamond instructed softly. "Tell him to fast forward to Tuesday night. I want to see if Bernardi's car was in the lot." Caprice nodded once and slipped out the door. 2 hours later, Levi stormed into the kitchen where Caprice was washing a pan. He slammed a tablet onto the stainless steel counter. The screen showed a grainy black and white image of a sedan parked near the shipping containers. The license plate was clearly visible. It was Bernardi's. Levi looked at Caprice. The usual hostility in his eyes was replaced by a jarring, unsettled bewilderment. "How did you know? I clean up after people," Caprice said, scrubbing a stubborn grease stain. "You learn a lot about a person by what they try to hide." Levi didn't offer a thank you. He didn't apologize for calling her a pet. He simply grabbed the tablet and walked out. But the next morning, when Caprice arrived for her shift, the security guard at the front gate addressed her as "Ma'am." The shift in the hierarchy was subtle, but in Diamond Kelly's world, it was deafening. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was an asset. The retaliation for Bernardi's betrayal was swift, silent, and bloody. Diamond didn't give details, and Caprice didn't ask. The heavy-set man simply stopped coming to the estate. The dock shipments resumed, but a cornered rat bites hardest right before it dies. It was a late Friday night in February. The temperature had plummeted, encasing the estate grounds in a thick, treacherous sheet of ice. Caprice had stayed late. Diamond was dealing with a brutal wave of phantom pain, and she refused to leave him alone in the dark to suffer through it. They were in the study. The only light came from the fireplace and the blue glow of Diamond's laptop screen. He was sitting in his chair, his eyes closed, his breathing deep and regulated. Caprice sat on the sofa opposite him, reading a worn paperback she had brought from her apartment. The silence was companionable, comfortable. Then, the world exploded. The bulletproof glass of the study window didn't shatter. It spiderwebbed with a sickening, high-pitched crack as a high-caliber round slammed into it from the darkness outside. Caprice jumped, dropping her book. A split second later, a second shot rang out. The glass held, but the impact sent a tremor through the floorboards. Diamond's eyes snapped open. The pain vanished, instantly overridden by the adrenaline of a man who had lived violently his entire life. "Get down!" he roared. He didn't hesitate. He slammed his hand onto a hidden button under his desk. A harsh, blaring alarm immediately ripped through the estate. Caprice threw herself to the floor. The plush Persian rug scraped her palms. Her heart hammered wildly against her ribs, her breath catching in her throat. She expected movie-style chaos, shouting, rapid gunfire, dramatic entrances. Instead, there was just terrifying, calculated precision. Heavy thuds echoed from the hallway outside the study, the sound of a door being kicked in, then the distinct, suppressed pop-pop of a silenced weapon. "They bypassed the gate," Diamond gritted out. He shoved his wheelchair backward, tearing the charging cable from the wall. He rolled violently toward a solid oak bookcase on the far wall. Costa's men, they must have paid off the perimeter guard. Caprice scrambled on her hands and knees, keeping her head below the level of the desk. "Where is Levi?" "Downstairs. It will take him 2 minutes to rally the inside guards and secure the stairs." Diamond reached behind a row of leather-bound encyclopedias. A metallic click sounded, and a hidden panel popped open, revealing a sleek, black handgun. He racked the slide with terrifying familiarity. Footsteps pounded in the hallway. They were getting closer, Diamond spun his chair to face the heavy mahogany doors. He leveled the gun, his grip rock steady. He looked like the monster the city believed him to be. But when he glanced down at Caprice, his dark eyes were wide with a desperate, frantic fear that had nothing to do with his own life. "The panic room is behind the fireplace," Diamond ordered, his voice sharp and unyielding. "The code is 4920. Get inside and lock the steel door." Caprice stared at him. "What about you?" "I can't get the chair over the threshold in time. I'll hold the door." "Go." The footsteps stopped right outside the study. Someone grabbed the heavy brass handle and rattled it. The door was locked, but the wood began to splinter under a heavy kick. Caprice looked at the fireplace. The concealed door was slightly ajar, a dark, narrow gap offering total safety. Then she looked at Diamond. He was paralyzed from the waist down. He was a sitting target. If they breached the room, he couldn't take cover. He couldn't run. He could only shoot until they shot him. The door splintered again. A piece of the frame cracked inward. The paralyzing terror in Caprice's chest crystallized into something entirely different. It was the same stubborn, unyielding grit that had forced her onto 2 buses every night for 3 years. She refused to lose the only thing in her life that had treated her like a human being. "I'm not leaving you in the hallway," she snapped. "Caprice, get in the damn room," Diamond roared. "Shut up and cover the door," she yelled back. She crawled behind his heavy oak desk, wedging herself into the narrow space between the wood and the wall, right beside his wheelchair. She reached up, grabbed the heavy fabric of his trouser leg, and pulled. "Lean forward," she ordered. "Keep your upper body behind the desk." Diamond complied instinctively, ducking his massive frame low just as the study door finally gave way. The wood exploded inward, showering the room in splinters. 2 men in dark tactical gear pushed through the threshold. Diamond didn't hesitate. He fired 3 times. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, a concussive force that rattled Caprice's teeth. The first man dropped instantly, crashing backward into the hallway. The second man dove behind the leather sofa, returning fire. Bullets shredded the air, tearing into the mahogany desk and shattering the plaster on the walls behind them. Wood chips rained down on Caprice's head. She squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her hands over her ears, curling into a tight ball against the wheel of Diamond's chair. Diamond fired twice more, his face a mask of lethal concentration. He tracked the movement behind the sofa, waiting for a clear shot. "Dom!" a voice roared from the hallway. "Levi!" A burst of automatic fire echoed from outside the room. The man hiding behind the sofa slumped forward, sliding off the leather cushions and hitting the floor with a sickening thud. Silence rushed back into the room, broken only by the blaring security alarm and the ragged sound of Diamond's breathing. "Room clear!" Levi shouted, stepping through the shattered doorway. He swept the space with his rifle, his boots crunching on broken glass and wood. "We have the perimeter. Costa's hit squad is down." Diamond slowly lowered his weapon. He didn't look at Levi. He didn't look at the bodies bleeding onto his expensive rug. He engaged the brake on his wheelchair and leaned down. He reached into the dark space behind the desk. His large, scarred hand found Caprice's shoulder. She was shaking violently, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He gripped her shoulder, his touch firm and grounding. "Look at me," he commanded softly. Caprice slowly raised her head. Her hair was coated in white plaster dust. A small cut on her cheek trickled blood, Diamond's chest ached with a sudden, violent intensity. He had ordered her to run. He had given her a free pass to save herself. And she had crawled into the line of fire to drag him into cover. "I told you to get in the safe room," he said, his voice ragged. Caprice wiped the dust from her eyes. The adrenaline crash was hitting her, but her voice was surprisingly steady. "I told you I wasn't leaving you. I don't break my word." Diamond stared at her, the reality of his violent world and the fierce, protective loyalty of the woman kneeling in the ruins crashing over him at once. He realized, with absolute certainty, that he didn't just want her in his house. He wanted her in his life, and God help anyone who tried to take her out of it. The cleanup was clinical. That was the detail that finally broke through Caprice's shock. Levi's men didn't panic. They didn't shout. They moved with a grim, practiced efficiency. Heavy plastic tarps were unrolled. The shattered glass was swept into industrial bins. Someone brought a bucket of bleach for the blood seeping into the Persian rug. It was just another Friday night in the Kelly Empire. Caprice sat on a leather chair in the hallway, an emergency blanket draped over her shaking shoulders. A paramedic had cleaned the cut on her cheek and checked her for a concussion, leaving her with a cup of sugary tea she couldn't bring herself to drink. Through the ruined doorway of the study, she watched Diamond. He was speaking quietly with Levi. The adrenaline was clearly wearing off. Caprice knew his tells by now. The tight pinch at the corners of his eyes. The white-knuckled grip on the armrests of his wheelchair. The slight, involuntary twitch in his jaw. His phantom pain was flaring, triggered by the massive spike of stress, but he refused to show it in front of his soldiers. Levi nodded, tapped a message into his phone, and stepped out of the study. He paused when he saw Caprice sitting in the hall. The hostility in his eyes was gone, replaced by a heavy, calculating respect. "I have a car waiting out front," Levi said, his voice low. "It will take you home. 2 of my men will stay stationed outside your apartment building until this Costa situation is permanently resolved." Caprice looked down at the lukewarm tea in her hands. "I'm not leaving." "Caprice," Levi sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You did good in there. You saved his life. But this isn't a movie. Costa missed tonight, which means he's going to try again tomorrow. You are a civilian. Go home." If I go home, he sits in that room by himself and lets the nerve pain tear him apart. "Because he's too proud to ask for the morphine," Caprice replied, flatly. She set the plastic cup on a side table and stood up, letting the foil blanket slide to the floor. "And he hasn't slept in 2 days. I'm staying." Levi stared at her for a long moment. He didn't argue. He just stepped aside. Caprice walked into the study. The cold winter wind howled through the shattered window, freezing the large room. Diamond was staring at the space where the barricade of heavy brass lamps still lay scattered. He looked up when she approached. "Levi was supposed to put you in a car," Diamond said. His voice was a harsh rasp, worn thin by pain and exhaustion. "Levi doesn't sign my paychecks," Caprice said. She walked up to his wheelchair, grabbed the heavy handles at the back, and disengaged the brake. "And you need to get out of this freezing room before your spine locks up completely." Diamond didn't fight her. The fight had drained out of him entirely. She wheeled him down the long corridor to his private quarters in the East Wing. The bedroom was untouched by the chaos. It was warm, silent, and secure. She helped him transfer from the chair to the edge of the heavy, king-sized bed. It was a mechanical process they had never shared before, but Caprice moved with steady, unhesitating hands. When he was settled against the headboard, Caprice went to the ensuite bathroom. She returned with a warm, damp washcloth and a glass of water. Diamond watched her in silence as she sat on the edge of the mattress. She reached out, gently wiping the white plaster dust from his hair and his forehead. Her touch was incredibly light, a stark contrast to the violence that had just torn through his home. "I told you to get in the safe room," Diamond whispered. The anger was gone. It was replaced by a raw, terrifying vulnerability. "I know what you told me," Caprice murmured, rinsing the cloth in a small basin she had brought with her. "You could have died, Caprice. A foot to the left, and that stray bullet from the hallway would have caught you in the chest." He grabbed her wrist, stopping her movements. His dark eyes searched her face desperately. "Why didn't you run?" Caprice looked down at his large, scarred hand wrapped around her small wrist. "Because my whole life, people have walked away when things got hard. My father, the banks, the doctors, everyone runs." She met his gaze, her eyes fierce and entirely devoid of fear. "I don't run, and I wasn't going to let you die alone in that room." Diamond's breath hitched. He reached up, his free hand cupping her jaw. His thumb brushed over the small white bandage on her cheek. "I am a paralyzed man with a target on my back," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I drag death and misery behind me like a shadow. I am the last thing in this world you need." "Stop telling me what I need," Caprice said softly. "I'm 26 years old. I survived poverty. I survived watching my mother lose her mind. I survived you throwing glass paperweights at the walls. I can survive a few bullets." She leaned in, closing the distance between them. When their lips met, there was no hesitation. It wasn't a gentle, tentative kiss. It was desperate. It tasted of plaster dust, adrenaline, and profound relief. Diamond's hand slid into her hair, pulling her closer, anchoring himself to the only real, solid thing in his fractured world. Caprice wrapped her arms around his broad shoulders, holding him tight. She didn't feel a broken mob boss. She felt a man who had finally stopped fighting his own survival. They broke apart, both breathing heavily in the quiet room. Diamond rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he breathed. "I'm right here," Caprice promised. 3 days later, the estate was a fortress. The shattered glass in the study had been replaced with reinforced steel shutters. The perimeter guards had been tripled, and Gideon Costa was dead. Levi didn't give the details, and Caprice didn't ask for them. She only knew it was over when the suffocating tension finally lifted from the house, and the men in dark suits stopped pacing the hallways. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The winter sun cast long, pale shadows across the pristine carpets of the newly repaired study. Caprice was wiping down the mahogany desk, moving methodically, the smell of lemon polish masking the lingering metallic tang of cordite. The door opened. Diamond wheeled in. He wore a crisp dark shirt and a tailored suit jacket, looking every bit the untouchable king he was. But the harsh, bitter lines around his mouth were gone. He rolled up to the desk and stopped. He watched her wipe down the wood for a moment. Then he placed a manila folder on the desk. Caprice stopped cleaning. She looked at the folder, then at him. "What is this?" "Open it," She set her rag down and flipped the thick cover open. Inside was a deed to a house in a quiet, affluent suburb across the state line. Beneath it was a bank statement showing a newly opened account in her name, holding a sum of money with more zeros than she had ever seen in her life. At the very bottom was a new identity file, a passport, a driver's license. Caprice stared at the documents. The silence in the room grew heavy, thick with unspoken words. "Costa is gone, but there will be others," Diamond said, his voice carefully controlled, stripped of emotion. "There is always another ambitious rat looking to take a piece of the city. That night in the study, it will happen again, next month, next year. It never stops." Caprice didn't touch the papers. She kept her hands perfectly still at her sides. "So you're paying me off?" "I am giving you an out," Diamond corrected. He gripped the wheels of his chair. "I am giving you the life you deserve. A quiet house, enough money to move your mother to a private facility near you. No debt, no fear, and most importantly, no me." Caprice looked up. Her eyes were hard, flinty. "You think you can just pack me away in a safe little box across state lines? I think you don't belong in a war zone." Diamond's composure finally cracked. He leaned forward, his voice rising, thick with frustration and fear. "Look at your hands, Caprice. You spent 3 years scrubbing floors to survive. You finally have a chance to breathe, to live a normal life. If you stay here, you become a permanent target. My enemies will look at you and see my only weakness. They will use you to break me." Caprice took a step around the desk. She didn't look at the money. She didn't care about the deed. "A weakness," she repeated, her tone flat. "Is that what I am?" "You are the only thing in this world I care about," Diamond admitted, the words tearing out of his throat. "Which means you are the only thing that can destroy me. Take the money, Caprice. Go, before I become too selfish to let you leave." Caprice stopped right in front of his wheelchair. She looked down at him, her expression a mix of anger and profound sorrow. "You think you're protecting me," she said quietly. "But you're just doing the exact same thing you did when your legs stopped working. You're building a wall. You're pushing away the only good thing in your life because you're terrified of losing it." Diamond looked away, his jaw clamped shut. Caprice reached out and grabbed his chin, forcing him to look at her. Her grip was firm, unyielding. "Listen to me very carefully, Diamond," she said, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "I don't want a quiet house in the suburbs. I don't want a fake name, and I don't want a normal life." She let go of his chin and picked up the manila folder from the desk. Without breaking eye contact, she ripped the thick stack of papers cleanly in half. Then she ripped it again, dropping the shredded pieces of her perfect escape into the brass wastebasket. Diamond stared at the torn paper, stunned. "I spent my entire adult life being powerless," Caprice continued, stepping into the space between his knees, resting her hands on his broad shoulders. "Being told what I owed, where I had to be, what I had to endure. I am finally exactly where I want to be. I choose you, the paralysis, the targets, the madness, all of it." Diamond reached up, his large hands gripping her waist. He looked up at her, the walls of his cynical, hardened soul completely crumbling. He saw the absolute certainty in her tired, beautiful eyes. She wasn't a maid anymore. She wasn't a victim. She was his equal, his partner, his anchor. "If you stay," Diamond warned, his voice a low, ragged rumble, "there is no walking away. I will never let you go." "Good," Caprice whispered. She leaned down, pressing her lips to his, sealing the promise. The world outside the bulletproof glass would continue to rage. Men would plot, violence would threaten, and the empire would demand its blood. But inside the fortress, the paralyzed king had finally found his queen. And for the first time in his life, Diamond Kelly had something truly worth fighting for. Did you feel the tension between Diamond and Caprice? Sometimes the loudest connection happens in the quietest moments. Diamond is a man broken by power and physical loss, while Caprice is drowning in the everyday reality of survival. Their worlds couldn't be more different, yet they both understand what it means to be trapped. If you want to see how this slow-burn mafia romance unfolds and what Diamond does next to protect Caprice, make sure to hit that like button. Share this story with your friends who love a gritty, grounded romance. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a part.